Hello, amazing ladies in business. Welcome to the HerStory podcast. I'm your host, Kylie King, the founder of Australian Ladies in Business Initiative. And today I am so excited to be joined by another Blue Mountains business owner, which is always incredible. But I would like to introduce you to Stacey Webb, owner of the business Stacey Webb. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been a listener for a long time, so I'm feeling really honoured to be here today.
Beautiful. I'm so excited to have you here because I don't want to jump the gun too much, but I actually have one of your books that I can see behind you. So I would love to get started with your listeners. If you want to give us a bit of like an introduction of who you are and what you do.
Yes, I'd love to. So my name is Stacey Webb and I am an intuitive somatic mentor and an author, and I support people on their healing journeys through the lens of their nervous system. When we support our nervous system and nourish our nervous system in that way, we can really attune and strengthen and follow our intuition. And I love that for people. So I do that in one-on-one group spaces and through my books.
Beautiful. So what made you get into nervous system stuff? I guess. What's the importance of the nervous system and why were you like, I want to play with this?
Well, the nervous system is so important because it is the backbone of everything that we do, how we function, how we react, how we respond, and, you know, how we are when we are stressed and anxious and experience trauma. And my background has been 20 years in the police force as a detective. So I specialised in sexual assault and coronial matters, so deaths reportable to the coroner. And in that environment, I'm surrounded by people who have experienced various states of trauma. And I needed to be able to be in a space where they felt safe enough to be able to share most raw, traumatic, vulnerable parts of their story. And as I sort of was going through that path of being a detective in that way, I was like, how can I best support them that would actually really help me as well? Because when you're taking a statement from someone, it's really important to try and get everything as you can in one statement. But when you are experiencing trauma, your memory recall is already affected. And depending on how that person is and how their state of their nervous system at that time, that also affects it as well. And the main part is needing them to feel safe enough to tell me that information, because if they don't tell me something in fear of being judged or that no one's going to believe them or anything like that, without them realising it, it could take out vital parts of evidence. And then you might have to get them back to get another statement, and that could also re-traumatise them. So I really wanted to know how could I best support them that would also make me do the best of what I can do with my job. So that led me down learning about the nervous system and learning how people react and respond to trauma, to stress, to anxiety, to overwhelm, and the different states and what happens as a result of that. And as I was learning and going through that beautiful rabbit hole, I also learned how much I needed that for myself. You know, at that point in time, you know, I've been studying the nervous system and somatic work for 15 years. So, you know, I guess you could say quite early in my career, within the first 5 years of learning about this, but I went into the detectives very, very quickly as well. I realised even just in that amount of time of being in the police force, how much I needed it for me, and then also how much I needed it for what has happened throughout my life before I even joined. So I went on my own beautiful healing journey, which I am, of course, still on, and studied and went a lot deeper when it came to somatics and the nervous system. And it just really drew me in another way and an extension of what I did when I was doing that type of work as a detective. You know, it's a creator and holder of space for those specific type of jobs, and I really wanted to see how could I do that a lot more in a different way. So I set up my business, and now I do this work in supporting people who are experiencing different types of stress and overwhelm and trauma and fears within themselves of why they feel they can't establish those boundaries, or why they don't feel they're good enough or worthy enough, and knowing that it's actually all back into our body, it's all back into our nervous system, and not realizing for most people at that time how important our nervous system is.
And I like the fact that, because one of the questions I was going to ask you, you're doing this for everyone else and worrying about everyone else, but of course yourself. And when we start to learn about different things, that's when we start to open up and go, oh, wow, this is something that I really need.
Definitely.
And especially in that space of taking those statements and where you were working, that's just that energy shift from people as well, because you would be feeling that and, you know, feeling their nervous system's unsettled. So then that could also upset your nervous system. So, yeah, that would have been very eye-opening.
I think it's really important as well, right? Because, you know, we're energy first, physical second. And, you know, you'll know it. Like you might sit down and meet someone new and you'll be like, oh, all of a sudden you're like, I just feel like I can just share everything with this person. And for perhaps someone, and you're like, oh, no, I don't. I feel like that person might judge me. I feel like that they may not really listen to me. And that's really important when you are needing to take statements. So you're needing to allow that your nervous system and your channel, in a sense, is supportive and be able to create and hold that space. Because without that person realizing it, they might go, oh, you're not going to believe me, or you're going to judge me. And they're all already going to be experiencing their own things in the background of what's happening and what they may fear while saying something going forward as well. There's so much happening in this space that for a police officer to sit there and be able to take that statement, they need to be able to make sure that it's purely going in with curiosity. And that's the whole point of being a detective, right? You might have some ideas of what may be happening, but you still got to come in with an open mind. You still got to come in with that curiosity and allowing that person to feel even a sense of whether they go, I don't even know if I can get through this. If there's a part of their nervous system that feels some element of safety, to be in space with you, to share something that has been so raw and so traumatic for them, that will ultimately help them and support them along their way as well. And, you know, my service is my medicine, right? I needed to do that for myself, knowing that I can also support others in that way as well.
Beautiful. So you've then said you started your own business.
Yeah.
So you've now, and I don't think most people realize, being a business owner can also really smash your nervous system, right? Because most of you, like the stresses of everything happening, but also maybe lack of sleep, not eating right, doing a million things, and also as a woman, putting a million hats on. Yeah. So you've jumped into being a business owner, helping people with their nervous system. How's your nervous system going as a business owner?
Well, you know, I definitely take care of that as well. Like, yes, I'm a business owner and I'm a wife and I'm a mother. I'm a mother to 4 children, and we live in a beautiful neurodiverse household. So it really needed to make sure on how can I support my nervous system, and having that awareness to go and that humility to go, I can't do this all myself, and that it's okay, and that I need to have support, and making sure that I'm asking people to create their own support systems and making sure that I'm doing that myself. And I do, and I have my own support systems, and I have my elements in place to support my nervous system, to support what I need when it comes to work life, family life, and everything else. And I think it's really important that we build that support system, whether that is something that is family, friends, free, paid elements of that. There can be more than one that really can create and strengthen that system for yourself, and I do that for me as well.
So for anyone that might not know, is there like a common sign or symptom when you realize that your nervous system may need some help, instead of just continuing to go, no, push through? Is there anything that is maybe a common sign or something that someone listening might be like, oh, I think I need to reach out and get that checked? Well,
I mean, the beautiful part of us is that we are all different, but When we are going into a sense of an activation into a sympathetic state, which might commonly be known as a fight or flight sense, that feeling that we're needing to brace in, hold in, that there's stiffness within the body, feeling angry or snappy all the time, impatient, and it might not be like you might be really great at work and feeling that you've got that patient at work, and then when you get home, it's like the smallest thing can set you off. And it may not necessarily be about the kids having mess all over the floor, because the kids always have mess over the floor, but it could be actually as a result of something else. So I think just taking note of how you're feeling and the behaviors throughout that day. So if there is that snapping, that impatience, that frustration that's lasting a little bit longer than perhaps what normally might happen, something might set you off or get you frustrated or angry at the beginning of the day, but if you're still thinking about it and it's still highly activated within yourself by the end of the day, where normally it would sort of ease off by then there's a sense that your body's been stuck in a sense of that fight or flight response. Again, wanting to sort of deter away from things, avoid things, dissociation, numb things. We want quite often, knowing how I am an emotional eater. I will want to change my state by food, and I can binge a lot of food. Obviously been working on that now, it's not as much now, but I would be that. So knowing when I'm grabbing for me particularly is the chocolate chip biscuits and chocolate itself, by doing that and then wondering, why am I feeling this way? What am I trying to numb? Because I'm trying to run away from something. And previously for me that was alcohol, and I'm 5 years sober now. So again, wanting to dissociate and numb from something. What am I trying to avoid? The feeling of something, because perhaps that feeling is too overwhelming for my nervous system right now, and I don't know how to be with it, and I don't know how to do that with myself. So there's those elements, and then we also can be in a way of this freeze aspect. People hear that flight and freeze, and so we might want to withdraw from everything. So you might be doing what you need to at work, but you might not really feeling like you're putting in all of the effort that you normally would. You're sort of thinking, what's the point? What's worth it? What does it matter? No one cares anyway. No one's going to purchase from me. No one's going to do this. And there can be elements of you starting to withdraw, whether it's from work life or from family life or from social life. Friends might ask, would you like to catch up? And it's always, no, I don't want to. And sometimes there's actual genuine reasons, but if it's an element of just withdrawing from all facets of life, could be an element of having that freeze aspect in it, that hopelessness and depression starting in as well. And then we sort of can go into a bit of a fawn state. People might hear of the fight, flight, freeze and fawn, and fawn is feeling like, we're needing to have to sort of like trying to keep the peace of things, avoiding that confrontation, wanting to appease other people in hopes that if I appease them, that they will like me, that they might buy from me and everything else. So feeling that you're lowering your boundaries to get someone to eventually purchase from you. So I'm a service-based business, so someone be like, can I meet with you at this time for a session? And maybe that's not normally a time because I do something with my kids, but I'm like, I really want to be able to have this person as a client. And so you're appeasing them. And as a result, perhaps for you and your family life, it might make such a big difference and a big disruption. So you're trying to appease someone else, and that's a very basic concept, but quite often we're wanting to avoid that confrontation. We don't want to perhaps speak up and set a boundary if you have someone that if you do have a boss ahead of you, or someone that's been able to help you and you're really wanting to be able to have that support. We will quite often just avoid doing anything in hopes that they may still perhaps either stop doing something or continue doing something for you. And for yourself, that low self-worth starts to come in, and the low boundaries. So there's many different elements, but if you're feeling like you're not in a state of openness, a state of, I'm not going to say happy, because we don't always need to be safe with our nervous system and always be happy, but this state of being curious, of being open, and being open to the idea of perhaps slightly going out of the comfort zone, open to the idea that things may happen and change, and you may be able to be flexible and adaptable to that, then there's a sense that your nervous system's in a dysregulated state. Now, there's nothing wrong with being in a dysregulated state, because we're meant to be in a dysregulated state and regulated state throughout various moments throughout our day. We just don't want to be stuck in those moments. So if you're feeling like you're in this dysregulated state, but you're been in it for a really, really long time, then perhaps that's a moment of where you need to take a bit more of awareness as to how you're feeling and seek that support if that's what you're looking for.
You've covered such a range of symptoms there that I think a lot of us, one, probably, I know myself, I didn't realize, I'm like, oh, that could be that and that could be that. And I guess I know for myself, I would brush that off as something else. Like, oh, if I'm feeling that way, it's because, this has happened, or it might be I'm not getting enough sleep, or I'm not doing whatever. And to know that all of that could add to the point that my nervous system just probably needs a bit of regulation is quite eye-opening.
Yeah. Well, and just needing a bit of regulation support. Like, as I said, it's okay for us to be dysregulated at times. Like, for our day, we're supposed, we're regulated, where we're feeling that openness and, groundedness within ourselves, and something might happen and we may spike into a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And that is completely okay, and it's completely normal. We are not supposed to be regulated all day, every day. Because if you think about it, going from regulated to dysregulated, up and down, if you think of it like a heart rate, and if we're just regulated all the time, we're just flatlining. We're actually not living life. We are human in a human body in this world. We are meant to experience the different states. What we're not supposed to do is be stuck in those states. So if we recognize that we are overwhelmed, and then we might take on, what am I overwhelmed about? What is happening? And is it necessary? Is it something that I need to advocate for myself? So we might be in a fight activation, and we might be advocating. But if we're able to do that and bring ourselves in a sense of a regulation within our nervous system, and that we can hold both, so we can advocate for ourselves and know that we don't need to stay stuck there and be angry at everyone else in the world. So we're not just angry at the person who we needed to advocate to, but we're angry to everyone else throughout the rest of the day. Then that's when we need to bring that support. Sometimes sleep does help us to be able to come back into a regulated state. When we don't have enough sleep, it does affect not only our nervous system, our brain, and everything else. So I think it's just sometimes there's an underlying fear or an underlying event that has happened as a result of why this is happening. And when we're able to bring support to that, and it doesn't always necessarily mean regulation, but we can allow support to be held in that, and we can feel an element of being regulated while still be angry, or still be sad, or still be in grief, then there's actually so much nourishment that can happen to our nervous system. And that's where the beautiful difference comes to, let's just be regulated and get ourselves to be happy, to how can we support ourselves. So if we are angry, how can we do it in a healthy way? How can we do it that's actually going to support the discharge that we need within our nervous system, rather than doing it in a way that is self-sabotaging ourselves, which actually puts us through a shame spiral and we're back to the beginning again.
Beautiful. It's a lot to delve into a short podcast.
It's a lot.
A lot to think about and process and then have a look at. So if we go back to being a business owner, and you're doing this work, and as I mentioned before, there's a lot of business owners I know that probably don't even realize that they need some support for their nervous system, because there's so many things going on, and that's without the outside things that aren't included as your title as a business owner.
Yeah.
During your journey as a business owner, what would you say has been your biggest challenge?
Firstly, at the start was also the challenge of trying to make sure that I'm balancing that home and business life. When you're starting a business, you really wanting to make it work. And I started my business so I could have that flexibility with my children and really be there for my children. Being a police officer, I felt like I was working all the time, and I was doing on call, and I could get a call and I won't be back for 18 hours, and I'm juggling everything else around, and that stress alone was obviously not supporting my nervous system. And I really wanted to have that balance, but when I first started, it was actually really hard to try and have that balance, because I was so conditioned to a certain way of working that even though I wanted it to change, I didn't know how. So I really needed to bring support through, business coaches and different ways as well to help me with that, because that was new to me. So knowing that it's okay that I didn't know how to do everything at the beginning, and just start anyway.
Yeah, that is important. We're not supposed to know everything in the beginning. And I think that's something really important people need to remember. Even, when a child's learning to walk, they don't know everything in the beginning. And, we support that child as we should be supporting business owners to go, look, we get you don't know everything. How can we help you or give you the right tools or guidance or assistance that will help there? Which I think is super important, and one of the main reasons that ALIBI started. So there was no gatekeeping, like come to the party and ask what you're after. So I think that's beautiful that you've mentioned that. If we flip the script though, what would you say has been your biggest achievement as a business owner?
Well, definitely my biggest achievement has been meeting a lot of my own fears that I couldn't do this work and that I couldn't be a business owner. Again, I've come from, being in the police force for nearly 20 years. I joined not long after I finished high school, and I was in a very conditioned way. Like, it's a hierarchical organisation, and I joined very young, that I had this conditioning that my skills couldn't be transferable and that I couldn't do anything else. And it sounds, to some people when I say that, they think it sounds really silly. But when you've been conditioned in a way to think that you can't do anything else but this and you won't succeed anywhere else, and to branch out and actually share different parts of me, share how we can bring this support to our nervous system and do it in this way of a business, that is the most massive achievement I've ever made, because I was able to break down that limiting belief that my skills weren't transferable and that I wasn't going to be good enough doing anything else. And yeah, really proud of that.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And talking about what you're doing, so you mentioned that you are a somatic practitioner.
Yes.
That's correct, yeah. Do you want to explain a little bit of what that exactly is? Because I know just recently I was at a networking meeting and someone said, I need a somatic practitioner, and everyone was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So while I have one on the podcast,
Yes.
Would you like to sort of sum up what that means, especially because you mentioned about, how our system can be dysregulated, that our body knows everything that's sort of happening and it's sending us messages that we might be too deaf or distracted to hear. Yeah, could you just explain a bit of what a somatic practitioner is?
Yeah, so soma means the body. So a somatic practitioner is working with the body, primarily for me, is working with our nervous system into bringing that support. So quite often when we experience trauma, and trauma is anything that overwhelms our nervous system. So that could be the car accident, but it can also be someone that has yelled at you in the street. Do you know what I mean? And everyone is different as to how their nervous system is. And so when something overwhelms that, we experience trauma. And what can come from that at times? Sometimes we're able to allow that support into ourselves naturally. We may self-regulate or co-regulate with someone else. So we may talk to someone, we may do some breathing, we may do some tapping, we may do many other different things by yourself or with someone else, and then it seems to feel okay, and that you might seem to feel that resourced and that nourishment into your nervous system of coming back to regulation. But sometimes there are, things that have happened that are, quite traumatic, or things that are very overwhelming, and we're just not too sure how we need to get that support. And that's where the somatic practitioner comes in, because sometimes it could be a part of the body that's actually wanting to communicate with us, and it shares its messages. Our nervous system is amazing. We have a beautiful brain. and our brain sends messages to our nervous system to allow, our organs to do what it does automatically, to allow our, blood to pump around our heart, and, to allow us to breathe, and our kidneys to work and everything else. But our body actually also sends more information to our brain than our brain does to our body. And so our body actually remembers things. And this is why we could have what's called a trigger, because our body has perceived what could be a threat because of something that's already happened in the past, and it's wanting to protect you. So when we're feeling this dysregulation, it's because our body wants to protect us. But sometimes the body doesn't understand time, because time doesn't mean anything to them. So they are perceiving a threat, whether it's real or from the past, or what they believe could happen in the future, and it will get your body to do different things as a result. And this is quite often while we go, I don't understand why I did that, because I knew that I was going to be okay. Your brain knew you were going to be okay, but your nervous system thought that there was a threat to your safety, and it did something to protect you. Hence the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And so what a somatic practitioner can do is allow those certain elements of what may be your triggers, or what may be constantly activating you to be stuck in a dysregulated state, to be able to help rewire the nervous system, to be able to know that the nervous system in this moment is safe, and be able to bring that support to the triggers. Now, this doesn't mean the trauma that we've experienced didn't happen, because of course it did, but it can be, how can we respond to that trauma? How can we respond to the stress? How can we respond to the overwhelm rather than react? Because when we're reacting, we can sometimes do it in a disembodied way, with a disembodied pattern, hence our dissociation, our numbing, and doing things in a non-healthy way, rather than how can we do it in a supportive, healthy way. So if we've experienced grief, and I have, I can share from my dad's death, there were many years where I reacted in my grief by drinking lots of alcohol to numb my pain, and, doing things like, then I would self-sabotage myself. If I have arguments with my friends and my partner, my husband now, but, my boyfriend back then, all these different things. And I would actually do things that was actually really not supporting the grief that I was experiencing, because I'd been in the shame cycle about what I've done, and I would do it all again. Whereas now, when I'm experiencing that moment of grief, how can I do it in a supportive way? How can I do it in a healthy way? I didn't want to cry, hence why I drank the alcohol, but it's actually okay if I cried. And how can I do it in a way where I feel safe enough to be able to cry and do something, so I'm not numbing and dissociating from a feeling, but I'm allowing myself to be held in that feeling and be held and supported at the same time. And there's a difference when it comes to that. And as a result of that, I'm not going through a shame spiral about what I've done. And then I can actually bring forth some support to my nervous system. That's just one example, and there's obviously many, but a somatic practitioner can obviously do wonders to not only, running a business, but just you overall to be able to run that business and do everything else that, ladies in business do.
Beautiful. Awesome. So what would you say, if you're willing to share, is your big, hairy, scary goal for your business? Where are you hoping to take Stacey Webb?
I would love to have a little store. I'm here in the Blue Mountains. I'd love to have a little store where I can do my one-on-one sessions and my group work, and also allow other people to do their group work as well while I'm writing my books and doing everything in between. I'd love to have that little store as well to be able to do all of that work.
Beautiful. So being the expert on the nervous system and a somatic practitioner, if there's one tip, one takeaway you could give the listeners today to say, hey, this is something in your tool belt you can use, or something that they can have a go at, and then they know if they need more, they can come and find you, what would that be?
Is to have an awareness as to how your breath is throughout the day. Because sometimes we may hold our breath, and why are you holding your breath? And other times you might feel that breath being shallow, or forced. Why is that? And other times it might feel really soft and elongated and everything else. And why is that as well? And that itself can sometimes just give you a bit of awareness as to perhaps how your nervous system is.
Beautiful. So just pay attention to your breathing and your breath work, and that'll help everything.
I think the first bit is always just having that awareness, so just paying attention to your breath and how it is at different times and different times throughout the day when you're doing different things, and seeing what information comes for you.
Beautiful. Now, you've mentioned before that you're an author, and I can see behind, those who are listening to the podcast can't, but if you're watching the YouTube, you can see behind you've got a whole range of books there. So how many books have you published now, Stacey?
So I've published 3, and the 4th one is with my editor. So my latest one just published in April, which is Embodied Grace, Trusting Yourself, Healing Deeply, Expanding Fully. That came out in only a few months ago, and it also has a beautiful set of cards if you can buy them separately or together. My second book was Foundations of Tapping, Inviting EFT and Other Tapping Practices into Your Life, which is again a great self-regulation and co-regulative tool to be able to support your nervous system. And my very first book is The Intuitive Detective, which is a bit of a memoir of my life and how listening to your intuition, and when you don't, how that also shapes your healing journey as well. So
beautiful. And then you've got your 4th book is at the editor, which is exciting.
Yes, the 4th book is Letters Worth Receiving, Writing Love Letters to the Body. So
beautiful. So where do we come and stalk you? How do we find you, or like buy your books and come and visit you in the Blue Mountains?
Yes, well, you can come and visit my website, which is www.staceywebb.com.au. It has all of my online one-to-one sessions. I have an upcoming in-person session at the bottom of the Blue Mountains in September, and you can purchase all of my books. All of my books are available on Amazon or your book retailer as well. They can always order it in, and you can also find me on Instagram at _Stacey Webb.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me today, and answering that question about what a somatic practitioner is, but also sharing your journey from leaving the police force and then starting on this beautiful journey that you are, and publishing so many books. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.